What happens when you give a determined, innovative military one of the most precise artillery systems ever developed? Russia found out in the summer of 2022, and the answer rewrote everything Moscow thought it knew about fighting this war. Within months of HIMARS arriving in Ukraine, over 100 Russian command posts, ammunition depots, and high-value targets simply ceased to exist. Imagine you're a Russian commander in occupied Ukraine, summer 2022. Your forces have momentum. Ukrainian defenses are straining. Your supply lines stretch back through territory you've held for months. Ammunition dumps are stacked high, positioned close enough to the front to keep your artillery fed. Command posts coordinate operations from buildings you've fortified and secured. Life isn't comfortable, but you feel relatively safe 50, 60, 70 kilometers behind the lines. And then one night the sky lights up. Explosions ripple through ammunition depots. Command posts disappear in fireballs. Logistics hubs that took weeks to establish are obliterated in seconds. The Americans have given Ukraine something new, and suddenly nowhere within 80 kilometers of Ukrainian forces is safe. The weapon that changed everything. Before we talk about what HIMARS destroyed, let's understand what made it so devastating. The M142 high-mobility artillery rocket system isn't just another rocket launcher. It's a precision strike system that fundamentally changes the calculus of modern ground warfare. Traditional rocket artillery saturates an area with explosives, hoping to hit targets through volume of fire. HIMARS operates on a completely different philosophy. One rocket, one target, guaranteed destruction. The GPS-guided GMLRS rockets it fires can hit a specific building from 80 kilometers away with accuracy measured in single-digit meters. Think about what that means operationally. A Russian ammunition depot 70 kilometers behind the front lines isn't protected by distance anymore. A command post in what was considered the safe rear area is now within reach of weapons that can put a rocket through a specific window. The system itself is brilliantly designed for survivability. Mounted on a wheeled truck chassis, HIMARS can fire its 6-rocket pod in minutes, then relocate before counter-battery fire arrives. Shoot and scoot, the fundamental tactic that makes HIMARS nearly impossible to kill. Russian forces quickly discovered they couldn't track and destroy HIMARS launchers because the systems never stayed in one place long enough to target. Ukraine received its first HIMARS systems in late June 2022. Within weeks, Russian forces in occupied territories began experiencing something they'd never faced before: precision strikes on targets they'd considered safely beyond Ukrainian reach. The intelligence revolution, finding the targets. HIMARS didn't operate in isolation. It was the striking end of a sophisticated kill chain that began with intelligence. And this is where Western support proved absolutely critical. Identifying Russian command posts, ammunition depots, and logistics hubs requires constant surveillance across vast areas. Satellites track vehicle movements. Signals intelligence intercepts communications that reveal facility locations. Human sources report on Russian positions. All of this information flows into a targeting process that identifies high-value targets and prioritizes them for strikes. Western nations, particularly the United States, provided Ukraine with intelligence support that dramatically enhanced targeting capabilities. Real-time satellite imagery showed ammunition being stockpiled at specific locations. Electronic surveillance identified command post communications. Ukrainian targeters suddenly had visibility into Russian rear areas that Russian commanders assumed were invisible to their enemy. The combination proved devastating. Intelligence found the targets. HIMARS destroyed them. This wasn't random bombardment hoping to hit something valuable. Every GMLRS rocket launched represented a confirmed high-value target that Ukrainian forces had identified, analyzed, and prioritized. Russian operational security, already poor, proved completely inadequate against this intelligence fires combination. Ammunition depots were positioned based on logistics convenience, not survivability. Command posts occupied obvious buildings without hardening or dispersal. Russian forces had grown accustomed to operating beyond Ukrainian artillery range and hadn't adapted to a threat that could reach 80 kilometers with precision. The Summer of Explosions: What Ukraine Destroyed. The statistics tell a story of systematic destruction that fundamentally altered the battlefield. Within months of HIMARS arriving, Ukraine had struck over 100 high-value targets across occupied territories. Ammunition depots became priority targets, and for good reason. Russian artillery operations consumed enormous quantities of shells and rockets. Each depot destroyed meant Russian guns falling silent for lack of ammunition. And because Russian logistics positioned these depots relatively close to the front for convenience, they fell well within HIMARS range. The videos that emerged showed spectacular secondary explosions. A single GMLRS rocket would strike a depot, and then stored ammunition would cook off in cascading detonations lasting hours. Millions of dollars worth of artillery shells, rockets, and missiles destroyed by a single precision strike, costing a fraction of what was lost. Command posts represented equally valuable targets. Russian military doctrine concentrates command functions in specific locations where officers can coordinate operations, analyze intelligence, and direct subordinate units. HIMARS turned these command posts into death traps. Strike the building, kill the officers, paralyze decision-making across an entire sector. Each strike degraded Russian operational capability in ways that couldn't be quickly remedied. You can't rush order replacement ammunition. You can't instantly train new staff officers to replace those killed. You can't rebuild a fuel depot overnight. The cumulative effect was devastating. Russian forces that had been advancing found themselves unable to sustain offensive operations. Artillery that had been firing thousands of rounds daily went silent as ammunition supplies dried up. Command structures that had been coordinating combined arms operations fragmented as officers were killed and communications disrupted. The psychological collapse. When safety disappears beyond the physical destruction, HIMARS inflicted psychological damage that rippled through Russian forces. The sudden vulnerability of rear areas created fear and uncertainty that degraded operational effectiveness across the board. Russian officers who had operated from command posts with relative impunity now faced an impossible calculation. Concentrate your staff for effective coordination, and you create a lucrative target. Disperse to reduce vulnerability, and you sacrifice the ability to plan and execute complex operations. Either choice benefited Ukraine. Logistics personnel faced similar dilemmas. Stockpile ammunition for sustained operations, and you build a target that HIMARS will eventually find and destroy. Keep supplies dispersed in smaller quantities, and you can't support the high-volume artillery fires Russian doctrine depends upon. Reports emerged of Russian units refusing to occupy certain buildings or areas because they'd become known as HIMARS magnets. The psychological impact of watching colleagues die in precision strikes created hesitation, fear, and degraded morale that no amount of propaganda could remedy. Junior soldiers saw senior officers dying in command post strikes. The message was unmistakable. Rank doesn't protect you, distance doesn't protect you, fortification doesn't protect you. Only dispersal and constant movement offered any safety, and both degraded operational effectiveness. The operational transformation: how HIMARS changed the war. HIMARS didn't just destroy targets, it fundamentally altered how both sides operated. The weapon system created effects that extended far beyond the immediate destruction of individual facilities. Russian logistics networks collapsed under the pressure of constant HIMARS strikes. Ammunition that had flowed freely to frontline units now arrived in trickles as depot after depot was destroyed. Russian artillery, which had enjoyed massive numerical superiority, found itself rationing shells because supply couldn't keep up with consumption plus losses. The Russian offensive that had been grinding forward through Donbass stalled. Without ammunition, artillery support degraded. Without artillery support, infantry attacks became far more costly. The operational momentum Russia had built through months of grinding attritional warfare evaporated within weeks of HIMARS arriving. Command and control suffered equally. Officers killed in command post strikes couldn't be instantly replaced. Institutional knowledge died with them. Ongoing operations lost their coordinators. Subordinate units found themselves without guidance at critical moments. Russian forces attempted adaptation, but struggled to match the speed of Ukrainian strikes. Ammunition depots moved farther from the front, increasing logistics complexity and reducing artillery responsiveness. Command posts dispersed, degrading coordination. Both adaptations reduced Russian operational effectiveness while still not guaranteeing safety from HIMARS. The strategic verdict: 20 launchers that changed history. 20 HIMARS launchers. That's what it took to transform the war in Ukraine's favor during the summer of 2022. 20 truck-mounted rocket systems firing GPS-guided munitions with devastating precision. The over 100 command posts and ammunition depots destroyed represented the visible destruction. Russian forces that had been advancing found themselves unable to sustain operations. The grinding offensive in Donbass lost momentum. 20 launchers, over 100 targets destroyed. One fundamental transformation in how this war would be fought. And Ukraine was just getting started. If this breakdown of HIMARS' devastating impact resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis of the weapons and tactics reshaping modern warfare. What other systems should we cover? Drop your suggestions in the comments.